The silence was a physical thing, so dense you could hear a heartbeat. 32 floors above Manhattan, in the most powerful boardroom in New York, Isabela Montenegro had just done something no one had done in 15 years. She had looked into the storm-gray eyes of Dante Salvatore and spoken a single word he had never heard. No. The word echoed like a gunshot. The most coveted and feared man on Wall Street stared at her, his expression a mixture of shock and something perilously close to fascination. For a fleeting moment, the world's most ruthless financial emperor discovered the silence of rejection. And then, for the first time in his life, Dante Salvatore truly smiled. The war had just begun. Isabela Montenegro smoothed the fabric of her black pencil skirt for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Her fingers trembled imperceptibly as the private elevator ascended the 32 floors of Salvatore Tower. The bronze-tinted mirror reflected a 28-year-old woman, her honey-brown hair swept into a flawless chignon. Her emerald green eyes shone with determination, and she possessed a natural beauty that no amount of discreet makeup could hide. 3 days ago, she was just another desperate candidate from the temp agency. Today, by some miracle she still couldn't fully comprehend, she was the new personal executive assistant to the most powerful man in Manhattan. The elevator doors whispered open, revealing a world of glass, steel, and silent luxury. The 42nd floor of Salvatore Tower wasn't just an office. It was a kingdom suspended between the clouds and the very dreams of power. Priceless Persian rugs lay over Carrara marble floors, while works of art she had only seen in books adorned tempered glass walls that offered a panoramic view of all New York. Miss Montenegro? The voice belonged to Margaret Chan, an Asian woman in her 50s with a professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. I'm the human resources manager. Mr. Salvatore is waiting for you. Isabella followed Margaret through a labyrinth of offices where assistants worked in absolute silence, as if in a sacred library dedicated to the god of money. The air conditioning kept the temperature at a perfect 22 degrees, yet she felt tiny beads of sweat forming at the nape of her neck. A few ground rules, Margaret murmured as they walked. Mr. Salvatore does not like to be interrupted on his calls. Do not ask personal questions. Do not touch anything on his desk without permission. And never, under any circumstances, question his decisions in front of others. Isabella nodded, absorbing each word like a survival mantra. She needed this job, not just wanted, needed it with an urgency that twisted her stomach into tight knots. They stopped before two massive doors of black mahogany that looked like a gateway to another universe. One last thing, Margaret said, her gaze softening with something that might have been pity. He's fired 17 assistants in the last 2 years. Don't take it personally. The doors swung open. Isabella stepped into the office, and her world stopped. Dante Salvatore stood behind a desk the size of a small dance floor. He held a phone to his ear, gesturing for her to enter while speaking in Italian. His voice, like black velvet, stretched over tempered steel. He was at least 6'5", with broad shoulders that perfectly filled out his charcoal Armani suit. His black hair was slicked back, revealing a face that looked as if sculpted by the gods themselves. A square jaw, high cheekbones, and a mouth that promised delicious sins. But it was his eyes that held her captive. Storm gray, intense as the charged air before a lightning strike. They swept over her from head to toe in a second that stretched into an eternity. Isabella felt as if he could see through her clothes, through her skin, straight into her soul. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, never taking his eyes off her. He hung up, placing the device on the desk with a fluid, controlled motion. Isabela Montenegro. His voice was exactly as she had imagined, deep, with a near imperceptible Italian accent that made her name sound like a sensual prayer. 28 years old, graduated magna cum laude from Columbia with a degree in business administration, fluent in 4 languages. Previous experience as an executive assistant at Morrison and Associates. He knew her resume better than she did. "Mr. Salvatore," she managed to say, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "Do you know why you're here?" Dante rounded the desk with a feline grace, each step a soft echo on the marble floor. "Of the 147 candidates we interviewed, you were the only one who didn't try to impress me with lies about your ambition to climb the corporate ladder or your passion for corporate challenges." Isabella blinked, confused. "I don't understand." "You told the truth, that you needed the job because you had bills to pay and a life to rebuild." He stopped just a few feet from her, and Isabella could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her senses spin. "Honesty is a rare commodity on this floor, Miss Montenegro." "It's rare everywhere, sir." Something flickered in his gray eyes. Amusement? Interest? "Explain." "I need this job." Isabella lifted her chin. "But that doesn't mean I will lie or compromise my principles to keep it. Honesty got me in the door. I intend for it to keep me here." For a moment, Dante Salvatore was silent. Then, slowly, a smile formed on his lips. Not the cold, calculated smile she'd seen in business magazines, but something genuine and surprisingly warm. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." The intercom on his desk buzzed sharply. "Mr. Salvatore, the directors for the European conference have arrived. They are waiting in the boardroom." Dante looked at Isabella. "Your first test, Miss Montenegro. The most important meeting of the quarter. You will take notes, and you will remain completely silent. Understood?" "Perfectly." "Then let's go." The conference room was a cathedral of modern power. A black glass table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by 12 Italian leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of Manhattan, where tiny specks of humanity moved like ants on the streets far below. 6 men in $3,000 suits rose as Dante entered. Isabella recognized a few faces from the business pages of Forbes, CEOs of multinational European corporations, each controlling billions in assets. "Gentlemen," Dante said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "I'd like to introduce Isabela Montenegro, my new executive assistant." The greetings were brief and professional. Isabella took a discreet seat against the wall, her tablet ready. The meeting began like a carefully choreographed corporate ballet. Dante commanded the table with absolute authority, his voice cutting through complex discussions of multi-billion-dollar acquisitions like a blade through silk. Isabella watched, fascinated in spite of herself, as he manipulated every man in the room with surgical precision. A placating word here, an intimidating glance there, a calculated silence that forced concessions. He was an apex predator, and he knew it. "The proposal from Benedetti Industries," one of the directors said, "a blond man in his 50s with a German accent, is generous, but the conditions are unacceptable. All proposals have conditions, Klaus. Dante leaned back, lacing his fingers together. The question is which ones we are willing to accept. Not these, not with a woman running the European division. The silence in the room became as thick as glass. Isabella felt every eye flick to her for a brief moment before returning to the table. Explain yourself. Dante's voice dropped an octave, taking on a dangerous quality. It's simple. Business is a man's game. Always has been. Always will be. A woman, especially a young, attractive one, creates unnecessary distractions. It compromises authority. Our traditional partners in Munich and Zurich would never accept reporting to a woman. Isabella felt blood boil in her veins, but she remained motionless. This was not her fight. An interesting perspective, Dante said softly. And what would be your alternative suggestion? Replace the female director with a qualified man. Problem solved. Or, Dante leaned forward, and Isabella could see the muscles in his shoulders tense beneath his suit. You could learn to work with competent professionals, regardless of what they carry between their legs. Klaus laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Dante, you're young, idealistic, but business is business. Do you want to close this deal or not? The silence stretched for several long seconds. Isabella could hear the distant hum of traffic 32 floors below, the soft whoosh of the air conditioning, her own controlled breathing. Then Dante stood up. You're right about one thing, Klaus. Business is business. He walked slowly around the table, a wolf circling wounded prey. And my business is building an empire based on competence, not on the prejudice of small men with even smaller egos. Klaus's face turned crimson. You're making a mistake, Salvatore. Perhaps, but it's my mistake to make. Dante stopped behind his own chair, his hands resting on the leather back. This meeting is over, gentlemen. My assistant will see you out. Wait. Klaus stood abruptly. You're really going to destroy a $2 billion deal over modern feminism? No, Dante smiled, and the expression was predatory. I'm going to destroy a $2 billion deal because you made a crucial mistake. What mistake? You thought I needed you more than you need me. The other directors exchanged nervous glances. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante, another man tried to intervene. Perhaps we can find a middle ground. The middle ground? Dante cut in smoothly. That would be me apologizing for Klaus's insult and pretending that sexism is a negotiable position. It is not. Then he did something that made Isabella's blood run cold. He turned directly to her. Miss Montenegro, his voice echoed through the silent room. You've heard the conversation. Klaus believes women are incompetent for leadership positions. As my executive assistant, you report directly to me and have access to confidential information that could impact millions of dollars in investments. In your professional opinion, are you competent for this responsibility? Isabella felt the world stop. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. 6 powerful men, including the most powerful of all, awaiting her answer. She could feel Klaus practically vibrating with indignation, the other directors shifting uncomfortably, Dante standing perfectly still. This was a test, not just of her professional ability, but of her personal integrity. The real question was, would she bow to the pressure, or would she stand on her principles? Isabella took a deep breath and rose slowly to her feet. Her heels clicked in the dead silence as she walked to the conference table. With all due respect, Mr. Salvatore, her voice was steadier than she felt. That is the wrong question. Dante raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what, pray tell, is the right question? Isabella looked directly at Klaus, who was staring at her with ill-disguised contempt. The right question is, why does a man so insecure in his own competence need to diminish half the world's population to feel important? The silence that followed was deafening. Klaus's face went from red to purple with rage. How dare you? I'm not finished, Isabella cut him off. And for the first time in her life, she felt true power course through her veins. Gentlemen, you control billions of dollars. You make decisions that affect millions of lives. You are leaders in your industries and countries. Why would you waste that power validating prejudices that are 500 years out of date? She turned back to Dante, who watched her with an unreadable expression. Mr. Salvatore, you don't need to defend me. Not because I'm a woman, but because I am a professional. And professionals, regardless of gender, deserve to be judged on their competence, not their anatomy. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She turned back to Klaus and smiled. As for you, Klaus, with all due respect, if your masculinity is so fragile that a competent woman poses a threat, perhaps the problem isn't with me. Perhaps the problem is that you never learned the difference between true power and disguised insecurity. The silence in the room was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. Klaus was visibly trembling with rage. The other directors seemed to alternate between shock and something that looked like admiration. And Dante? Dante was smiling. Not his cold, calculated business smile, but something genuine, warm, and dangerously attractive. Well, Klaus finally sputtered. I've never. No, Isabella interrupted softly. Clearly, you haven't. Then, to the horror of the directors and the utter fascination of Dante, Klaus did the unthinkable. Salvatore, he snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Isabella. Either you fire this, and careful. Dante's voice turned lethal. Choose your next words very carefully. Either she goes, or we go, and we take our money with us. The ultimatum hung in the air, like toxic smoke. Isabella's stomach plummeted. She had just cost the most powerful man in Manhattan $2 billion. Dante rose slowly, walked to stand beside her, and for the first time since she had entered the room, Isabella felt she wasn't alone. Gentlemen, he said, his voice like silk, let me make something perfectly clear. This woman has been in my employ for exactly 47 minutes. In that time, she has demonstrated more professional integrity than some of you have in 15 years of partnership. He paused, letting the words sink in. Klaus, you were right about one thing. Isabella is a business decision, Dante stated, his voice dangerously calm. And my decision is that I prefer to work with people who judge on merit, rather than with dinosaurs who mistake prejudice for tradition. Klaus's face turned a mottled shade of red. You will regret this, Salvatore. I already do, Dante replied softly. I regret wasting my time with small men when I could be building something greater. Let's go. Klaus gestured to the other directors. We don't need to listen to any more of this feminist nonsense. But as he turned to leave, Dante did something that made Isabella's heart stop. He laughed, not a laugh of humor, but of genuine, chilling amusement. Klaus, he called out, his voice echoing in the silent room, stopping the German at the door. Do you really think you'll find a better partner than me? Someone with my contacts, my network, my influence? Klaus turned, his bluster fading into uncertainty. I wish you luck, Dante continued, a predatory smile playing on his lips. You're going to need it. The implied threat was crystal clear. Dante Salvatore had enough power to destroy Klaus's career with a single phone call. That's blackmail, Klaus stammered. No, Dante's smile widened. This is business. The directors filed out in a dead silence. Klaus slammed the door behind him with enough force to make the paintings on the walls tremble. Isabella was left alone with Dante, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Dante turned to her, and Isabella saw something in his eyes that made her tremble for reasons entirely different from fear. Admiration, respect, and something deeper, more dangerous. Miss Montenegro, he said, his voice a low murmur. In my 36 years, very few people have had the courage to stand up for me, and none have ever done so at the cost of $2 billion. Isabella felt tears sting her eyes. Mr. Salvatore, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. Shouldn't have? He interrupted, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You did exactly what you should have done. The question is, he paused, now so close that Isabella could see the fine lines around his eyes, could feel his breath ghosting across her skin. The question is, do you have any idea what you've just done? Cost you a fortune? She whispered. No, Dante smiled. And this time, there was something both predatory and promising in his expression. You've just shown me that there are still people in this world who choose principles over profit. And that, Miss Montenegro, is worth far more than $2 billion. Isabella felt something warm and dangerous spread through her chest. So, I still have a job? Dante's laugh was low and rich, sending a shiver down her spine. My dear Isabella, he murmured, you don't just have a job. You've just become the most interesting woman in Manhattan. And as he walked away, returning to his desk as if nothing had happened, Isabella realized a truth that shook her to her core. She was no longer just his assistant. She was his equal. And from the dangerous glint in Dante Salvatore's eyes, he knew it too. The game had just begun. The whispers started before Isabella even reached her office the next morning. She could feel the furtive glances, the hushed murmurs, the weight of being the center of every conversation in the corridors of Salvatore Tower. News of the confrontation with Klaus Benedetti had spread through Manhattan's corporate elite like wildfire. The new assistant, she lost Salvatore $2 billion. She heard one secretary whisper to another in the elevator. They say she screamed at the German director, the other replied, her voice filled with awe. Called him incompetent in front of everyone. Isabella kept her face a mask of composure, but inside, her stomach was twisting into knots. The versions of the story grew more distorted with each retelling, transforming her measured defense into a hysterical attack. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, revealing Margaret Chan waiting with an expression that wavered between admiration and concern. Miss Montenegro, Margaret said, walking with her down the silent hallway. I need to warn you. Today is going to be intense. Intense how? The phone hasn't stopped ringing. 16 financial journalists, 8 business blogs, 4 trade magazines, and Bloomberg, all wanting to interview the woman who made Dante Salvatore choose principles over profit. Margaret paused. And those are just the ones we could identify. And the others? 3 job offers from direct competitors offering obscene salaries, 5 dinner invitations from very rich, very married men, and a bouquet of red roses that arrived at 6 this morning. No card. A chill ran down Isabella's spine. From who? We don't know. But the roses are from Maison de Fleur. A dozen costs $1,200. They stopped before the double doors of Dante's office. Isabella took a deep breath, smoothed the skirt of her deliberately conservative navy blue suit, and walked in. Dante was on the phone, as always, but this time there was something different in his posture. His shoulders were slightly tense, his jaw tight, a contained energy that made the air in the room crackle with a dangerous electricity. Non mi interessa cosa pensano, he was saying in Italian, his voice low, but laden with authority. Se non possono accettare le mie decisioni, possono trovare un altro partner. He saw her enter and gave a discreet gesture for her to sit. Isabella took her usual seat in a chair beside his desk, tablet at the ready, trying to ignore how his mere presence made her skin tingle. Bene, tienimi informato. Dante hung up and leaned back in his chair, studying her with those storm gray eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. Good morning, Mr. Salvatore, she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Isabella. Her name on his lips was like a caress, making her shiver almost imperceptibly. Did you sleep well? The question seemed innocent, but the way he was looking at her suggested an interest that went beyond professional courtesy. Yes, thank you. Good, because you're going to need all your energy today. Dante stood, rounding the desk with the fluid, feline grace that she found so mesmerizing. In the last 15 minutes, I've received 17 calls, 9 congratulating me on a display of progressive leadership, 6 questioning my emotional stability, and 2 offering to buy my shares at 40% below market value. Isabella felt her stomach drop. Sir, Shh. Dante moved until he was standing beside her chair, so close she could feel the heat from his body. Do you know what this means? That I've put you in a terrible position? It means so, his voice dropped to a near whisper, that for the first time in years, Manhattan is talking about Dante Salvatore for something other than numbers and acquisitions. They're talking about principles, about character. He leaned down slightly, resting a hand on the back of her chair, his face inches from hers. And that, Cara, Isabella, is priceless. The use of her first name, spoken with that soft Italian accent, sent a wave of dangerous warmth through her. Klaus called again, Dante continued, straightening up. 3 times. He wants to negotiate. It seems he's discovered that his other potential partners aren't as interested as he'd hoped. What did you say? I told him my assistant manages my schedule. If he wants a meeting, he'll have to ask you. Isabella blinked, confused. I'm sorry? Dante smiled, that predatory smile that made her heart race. Congratulations, Isabella. You've just been promoted. In addition to executive assistant, you are now my official spokesperson for matters related to corporate diversity and inclusion. Your salary has just tripled. But I can't, I'm not qualified to. You have the only qualification that matters, Dante interrupted, returning to his desk. Integrity. And in the world I'm building, that's worth more than any degree. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Salvatore, Victoria Ashford from Ashford Communications is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Dante and Isabella exchanged a look. Victoria Ashford was one of the most powerful women in Manhattan, CEO of the largest public relations firm on the East Coast. Put her through. Dante activated the speakerphone. Dante, darling, Victoria's sophisticated voice filled the office. I must congratulate you. In 20 years of my career, I've never seen Manhattan so stirred by a display of principle. Victoria, Dante leaned back. I imagine you're not just calling with congratulations. Perceptive as always. I have a proposal. Fortune magazine wants to do a cover story on the new paradigm of male corporate leadership. You and your assistant would be the stars. Photos, interview, the whole package. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. A cover story in Fortune meant national exposure. Her personal life dissected by the media. Interesting, Dante said, his eyes fixed on Isabella's pale face. But I'll need to consult with my team. Naturally. But Dante, don't take too long. This wave of positive publicity won't last forever. And there are other people very interested in capitalizing on the powerful man defends competent woman narrative. After the call ended, the silence in the office was broken only by the distant sound of traffic below. No, Isabella said finally. Dante raised an eyebrow. No, what? The interview, the story, anything that puts my life under a spotlight. She stood, walking to the window, trying to calm nerves that felt like they were on fire. I don't want to be a symbol. I don't want to be the brave assistant who became a feminist success story. And why is that? The simple question carried an immense weight. Isabella was silent for a long moment, watching the tiny people walking on the sidewalks so far below. Because symbols aren't real people, she said at last. They're constructions, impossible expectations. And when you become a symbol, you stop being yourself. Dante came to stand behind her, so close she could feel his breath on her neck. Who are you, Isabela Montenegro? The question hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? Not what she did, not her qualifications, not her ambitions, but who she truly was. She began, then trailed off. You can trust me. Dante's voice was low, almost intimate. As unlikely as that seems, after knowing me for only 24 hours. Isabella turned, finding herself face to face with him, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. I'm someone who's been a symbol before, she whispered, and it almost destroyed me. Something in Dante's expression shifted. The mask of the ruthless CEO slipped for a moment, revealing something more human, more vulnerable. How? I was... Isabella took a shaky breath. I was engaged to Jonathan Whitmore. The name dropped between them like a bomb. Dante became very still. Jonathan Whitmore, heir to one of Boston's most traditional families, elected senator at 32. Married to Caroline Ashford, yes, Victoria's niece, in a ceremony that was the cover of Vogue. Married 3 weeks after breaking off a 2-year engagement to a promising young woman from a middle-class background. Isabella Whitmore, Dante said softly, as if the pieces of a puzzle were clicking into place. The fiancé who vanished 2 weeks before the wedding of the century. The fiancé who discovered she was just a piece in his political game, she corrected, her voice brittle. Someone relatable enough to humanize his image, but disposable when a more advantageous connection appeared. Dante remained silent, processing the information. For 2 years, I was the perfect girlfriend. The words poured out of her now, as if a dam had broken. I smiled for the photos, talked about family and traditional values. I let them mold me into a palatable version of myself for public consumption. And when they didn't now need the symbol anymore, they discarded the person. So that's why you don't want the interview. That's why I need to be more than just the assistant who defied her boss. I need to be Isabela Montenegro, a competent professional who happens to be a woman, not a woman who happens to be a professional. Dante reached out, his fingers lightly touching her cheek. The contact was electric, sending a shock wave of heat through her entire body. You are not a symbol to me, he said softly. You are the most fascinating woman I have ever met. Mr. Salvatore. Dante, he corrected. When we're alone, I'm just Dante. The intimacy implied in the request made Isabella's heart race dangerously. Dante? She tested the name, liking the way it felt on her lips. We can't mix work with... With what? His fingers traced the line of her jaw. With honesty? With mutual respect? With the fact that you intrigue me more with every passing minute? With complications, she whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Cara, Isabella. Dante leaned closer, his lips just inches from hers. My entire life has been about complications. The only simple, pure thing I've found recently was you, defending me yesterday afternoon. For a moment, Isabella thought he was going to kiss her. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to give in, to let this impossible man shatter all her carefully constructed defenses. But then, the intercom buzzed again. Mr. Salvatore? Margaret's voice was tense. We have a problem. Jonathan Whitmore is in the lobby. He wants to speak with Miss Montenegro. Isabella went as white as a sheet. Dante pulled back instantly, his professional mask snapping back into place like a suit of armor. Tell him she's unavailable, Dante said coldly. Sir, he says he's not leaving until he speaks with her, and there are reporters with him. Reporters? 4 TV cameras, sir. Apparently, someone leaked that Isabela Montenegro and Isabella Whitmore are the same person. Isabella's blood ran cold. Her past, the one she had spent 2 years trying to bury, had just exploded in her face at the worst possible moment. Dante turned to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw a raw fury in his eyes, a fury not directed at her. Son of a bitch, he muttered, grabbing his phone. Marcos, I need you in the lobby. Now. We have a situation. No, don't leave her alone for a second. He hung up and turned back to Isabella, who was trembling. Listen to me. His voice was low, but absolutely firm. I am not going to let that bastard turn you into a symbol again. Not him, not the media, not anyone. Dante, I have to leave. If I stay, this will turn into a circus. It will hurt you. It will hurt the company. No. Dante stepped closer, taking her face in his hands. You are not running away. You will not run away, not this time. His gray eyes blazed with a fierce determination. Do you want to be seen as Isabela Montenegro, a competent professional? Then that is exactly what we are going to do. How? Dante smiled, and there was something both predatory and promising in that expression. We are going down there together, as professionals. You will face their questions with the same dignity you showed Klaus yesterday. And when they ask about Whitmore, you will tell the truth, that the past is the past, and you are focused on the future. And if they ask about us, about our relationship, then Dante leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. You will say that you work for a man who values competence above all else, and that anything else is unnecessary speculation. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling his strength seep into her. Can I do this? She whispered. I know you can. Dante stepped back, extending his arm, ready to show Manhattan that Isabela Montenegro is not easily intimidated. Isabella took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and placed her hand on his arm. Ready. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, they were met by a sea of camera flashes and shouted questions. Jonathan Whitmore stood at the center of the chaos, impeccably dressed in his political suit, smiling for the cameras as if he were on the campaign trail. But when he saw Isabella stepping out of the elevator on the arm of Dante Salvatore, his smile faltered. And for the first time in 2 years, Isabella Montenegro smiled back. Round two was about to begin. The lobby of Salvatore Tower had transformed into a civilized battlefield. Camera flashes exploded like miniature suns as reporters shouted questions over one another. At the heart of the chaos, Jonathan Whitmore waited with the confident posture of a man accustomed to controlling narratives. Isabella felt Dante's arm tense beneath her hand as they approached the throng. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of predatory curiosity. Miss Montenegro, is it true Mr. Salvatore promoted you after you insulted a business partner? Isabella, how does it feel to work for a man notorious for firing his assistants? Mr. Salvatore, was $2 billion for a matter of principle a mistake? Dante raised a hand, and astonishingly, the lobby fell silent. Such was the power of his presence. Even in chaos, he commanded absolute attention. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, his voice echoed, crisp and clear in the marble and glass space. Allow me to clarify a few facts. Miss Montenegro is an exceptional professional who took a stand based on merit and competence. Any business decision I made was based on those same principles. But Mr. Salvatore, a reporter from Bloomberg stepped forward. Sources indicate you only met 2 days ago. Doesn't it seem rash to make such drastic changes based on— On what? Dante interrupted, his tone soft, but his voice laced with steel. On a clear demonstration of professional integrity? On the courage to defend principles even when it's costly? If those are not the qualities I value in my employees, then what kind of leader would I be? It was then that Jonathan made his move. Parting the crowd with the calculated smile Isabella knew so well. Isabella, he said, his voice carrying the false intimacy he always used at public events. It's good to see you again. You look— Well, Isabella finished, feeling Dante tense beside her, but keeping her own voice steady. Jonathan, I wasn't expecting to see you here. When I heard you were in New York, I couldn't resist. After all, he glanced directly at the cameras. We have a history together. The silence in the lobby became thick, expectant. Every camera turned to Isabella, waiting for her reaction. Yes, she said calmly, we do. A history that ended 2 years ago when you chose political ambition over personal honesty. Jonathan blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. Isabella, darling, you were always so dramatic. Our relationship ended amicably. It ended, Isabella cut him off, her voice gaining strength, when I discovered you were secretly negotiating an engagement to Caroline Ashford while we were planning our wedding. It ended when I realized I was just a convenient piece in your political game, until a better one came along. The cameras fired in a frenzy. Jonathan was visibly uncomfortable. You're distorting the facts. I'm clarifying them. Isabella took a step forward, and Dante could feel the force emanating from her like heat. For 2 years, I let you mold me into a more palatable version of myself, the working class girlfriend who humanized your privileged image. Well, I am no longer that person. And what person are you now? A reporter shouted. Isabella turned to the crowd, and for the first time since stepping off the elevator, she smiled genuinely. I am Isabela Montenegro, executive assistant and head of diversity for Salvatore Industries, a professional who is judged on competence, not on past or future relationships. In your relationship with Mr. Salvatore? Jonathan asked, his voice laced with poorly disguised venom. Isabella looked at Dante, who was watching her with a mixture of admiration and something deeper glowing in his gray eyes. My relationship with Mr. Salvatore is professional and based on mutual respect, something you never understood. Professional? Jonathan laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Isabella, everyone knows Salvatore's reputation with beautiful women. The shift in the air was instantaneous and dangerous. Dante moved with feline speed, placing himself between Isabella and Jonathan. Careful. His voice was a low growl, charged with a lethal threat. You just crossed a line you should not have crossed. Or what? Jonathan straightened, trying to appear intimidating. You'll sue me? Destroy my career? I'm a United States Senator, Salvatore. I have protections you can't even imagine. Dante smiled, and there was something truly terrifying in the expression. Senator Whitmore, he said softly, let me make something clear. I don't need to destroy your career. You're doing a fine job of that all by yourself. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that, in the last 5 minutes, you have insulted a respected woman in front of national cameras, insinuated she's incompetent, suggested I hired her for personal reasons, and basically confirmed you treated her as a disposable object during your relationship. Dante paused, letting the words sink in. In an election year, with women making up 52% of the electorate, the color drained from Jonathan's face. Furthermore, Dante continued, I'm certain your advisors are watching this live feed and calculating just how much damage control will be needed to clean up the mess you just made. As if summoned by Dante's words, Jonathan's phone began to ring. He ignored it, but the persistent sound echoed through the silent lobby. Aren't you going to get that? Isabella asked softly. I bet it's your campaign manager. Jonathan looked from her to the cameras, then to Dante. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked genuinely nervous. This isn't over, he muttered. You're right, Isabella replied. It isn't. Because now all of Manhattan knows exactly what kind of man you are. And I can finally move on, knowing I made the right choice 2 years ago. Jonathan stalked out of the lobby without another word, his flustered aides scrambling after him. The reporter's questions continued for a few more minutes, but Dante shut them down with diplomatic authority, promising an official statement later. When the lobby finally emptied, Isabella and Dante found themselves alone in the elevator, ascending back to the 42nd floor. You were magnificent, Dante said softly. Isabella leaned against the elevator wall, feeling the adrenaline finally drain from her system. I felt like I was outside my body, like someone else was speaking. That was you, the real you, the woman I met yesterday afternoon. Dante moved closer, bracing a hand on the wall beside her head. The woman who fascinates me more with every passing second. Isabella looked up at him, seeing her own reflection in his gray irises. Dante, I need to say something. No, he interrupted. I do. And I need to say it now, before I lose my nerve. What? For 36 years, I have built an empire based on absolute control. I control my business, my emotions, my relationships, everything. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and Isabella leaned into his touch. But you make me want to lose control. Isabella's heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. That's dangerous. I know. His lips were inches from hers. You are dangerous to everything I've built, to all my discipline, to all my logic. Then why? Because, for the first time in my life, Dante whispered, I've found something worth more than control. Their mouths met in a kiss that was like liquid fire. Isabella felt all of her carefully constructed defenses crumble at once. Dante's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer as she clung to his shoulders as if to keep from drowning. The kiss was everything. 2 years of loneliness, anger, pain, and rebirth concentrated into one moment of pure connection. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing heavily. This changes everything, Isabella whispered. I know. We're boss and employee. This is complicated, Dante finished, but not impossible. The elevator doors opened, revealing the 42nd floor. They separated reluctantly, the electricity between them still charging the air. Mr. Salvatore? Margaret Chan was waiting for them. The board meeting has been moved to 2 p.m., and Victoria Ashford has called 3 times. She wants an answer about the fortune piece. Dante looked at Isabella. What's your decision? Isabella thought for a moment. They had tried to turn her into a symbol again, but this time, she had controlled the narrative. Maybe it was time to fully own who she had become. Except, she said firmly, but on one condition, which is, the article focuses on a business philosophy based on merit, not on our personal dynamic. Dante smiled. Done. As Margaret walked away to make the calls, Dante stepped close to Isabella again. Dinner tonight? He asked quietly. Dante, as professionals, he added with a mischievous glint in his eye, discussing corporate strategy at a very public, very proper restaurant. Isabella laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. What time? 8, Le Bernardin? That's too expensive. Isabella, Dante touched her cheek gently. Let me take care of you. Just for tonight, she whispered, leaning into his touch. Just for tonight. But they both knew it was a lie. Tonight was just the beginning. At 7:45 that evening, Isabella looked at herself in the mirror of her small Upper East Side apartment. The black Diane von Furstenberg dress, one of the few expensive pieces left from her former life, hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and subtle makeup highlighted her green eyes. She looked like a powerful woman. She felt like one. The restaurant was exactly as she had imagined, elegant without being ostentatious, intimate without being scandalous. Dante was waiting for her at a secluded table, devastatingly handsome, in a dark suit, no tie. You look beautiful, he said, rising to pull out her chair. Thank you. The conversation flowed naturally through dinner. Business blended with personal stories, genuine laughter, punctuating serious discussions about corporate strategy. Isabella discovered that behind the mask of the ruthless CEO was a man who was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable. Why did you build all this? She asked over dessert, gesturing vaguely toward the windows that showed Manhattan glittering like a sea of diamonds. Dante was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. My father was a gardener, he said finally. My mother, a cleaner. We came from Naples when I was 8 with $100 and a suitcase of used clothes. Isabella leaned forward, fascinated. I grew up watching my mother clean the offices of men who made in a day what she made in a year, watching my father tend the gardens of mansions he could never afford. Dante met her eyes. I swore that one day I would be the man in the office, not the one cleaning it. And you did it. I did. He paused. But in the process, I forgot that power without purpose is just an inflated ego. And what's your purpose now? Dante reached across the table, his fingers lacing with hers. Honestly, for the past 2 days, my purpose has been to impress an extraordinary woman. A warmth spread through Isabella's chest. Come with me, Dante said suddenly. Where? My apartment, not for that, he clarified quickly. Just to talk. To be together without performing for anyone else. Isabella looked at him, at the raw honesty in his eyes, and knew her answer. This was the man who, in 3 short days, had turned her life upside down, who had made her feel powerful, desired, and valued. Yes, she whispered. Dante's apartment consumed the entire top floor of a pre-war building on the Upper West Side. When the doors of the private elevator opened directly into his living room, a soft gasp of admiration escaped Isabella's lips. The space was a perfect blend of modern luxury and personal warmth. Dark oak floors, honey-colored leather sofas, and carefully selected works of art. But it was the photographs that captured her attention. Black and white images of an Italy that seemed plucked from a dream. Did you take these? She asked, drifting toward a photo of an olive grove at sunset. On my last trip to Naples to visit my nonna. Dante came to stand behind her. She's 93, and she still makes the best pasta in the region. You love her very much. She's the one, he said, his voice lowering, who keeps me connected to who I really am, beneath all the expensive suits and billion-dollar decisions. Isabella turned to face him, gently touching his cheek. And who are you, really? I don't know anymore, he admitted, covering her hand with his own. But with you, I feel closer to finding out. They kissed again, but this time was different, slower, deeper, filled with unspoken promises. Isabella's hands explored the hard planes of his chest through his silk shirt as he pulled her closer, as if trying to merge their bodies into one. Isabella, he breathed against her lips. If we don't stop now. I don't want to stop, she answered, surprising herself with her own boldness. Not this time. Dante's eyes darkened. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He swept her into his arms effortlessly, carrying her to his bedroom. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked like liquid silk. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan stretching endlessly in every direction. Dante set her down gently on the bed, then pulled back slightly. You're too beautiful to be real, he murmured, his eyes tracing every inch of her. Then touch me, Isabella whispered. Prove I'm real. And he did. With adoring hands and searing kisses that set her on fire from the inside out, he proved she was no dream. For hours, they explored each other with a growing reverence and passion, each touch a revelation, each moan a confession. When they finally came together, it was with an intensity that left them both trembling. Isabella had never felt so complete, so alive, so loved. even if the word had not yet been spoken. Later, lying tangled together in the soft glow of the city lights, Isabella traced lazy circles on Dante's chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "That this is insane," she admitted. "3 days ago, I was just a desperate, unemployed woman. And now," he murmured, "you're the woman who has turned my entire world upside down." Isabella propped her head up to look at him. "And is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Dante smiled, pulling her up until she was lying on top of him. "Cara mia," he whispered, "it's the best thing that has ever happened to me." As they kissed again, Isabella knew there was no turning back. She had fallen for the most dangerous man in Manhattan, and for the first time in her life, she didn't care about the consequences. Isabella awoke wrapped in silk sheets and the masculine scent of Dante. Golden morning light filtered through the panoramic windows, painting Manhattan in shades of honey and amber. For one perfect moment, she let herself pretend that this was real, that she could wake up every morning in the arms of the man who made her feel more alive than she had ever imagined possible. Then reality hit her, like a punch to the gut. She had slept with her boss, the most powerful CEO in Manhattan, a man who could make or break careers with a single word. "Buongiorno, bella addormentata." Dante's husky voice made her turn. He was propped on his elbow, watching her with those storm gray eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. "Sleeping Beauty?" she asked, trying to ignore the way her heart hammered at the sound of his voice. "My nonna used to call me that when I was little and slept in late." Dante leaned in, kissing her softly. "But you are far more beautiful than any fairy tale princess." Isabella melted against him. But then Dante's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Reality invaded their perfect moment like ice water. "Ignore it," Dante murmured against her neck, kissing the sensitive skin just below her ear. But the phone kept ringing, insistent, impossible to ignore. "It could be important," Isabella said reluctantly. Dante sighed and answered, "Salvatore." Isabella could hear an agitated voice on the other end, but couldn't make out the words. "When?" Dante's voice grew tense. "How long do we have?" "I see. We'll be there in an hour." He hung up, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration Isabella was already beginning to recognize. "What happened?" "The fortune piece. It goes live online in 2 hours. Print edition is out tomorrow." Dante rose from the bed, magnificently naked, and walked to the window. "But there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Someone leaked information about your personal life to the magazine, details that weren't in the interview." Isabella's blood ran cold. "What details?" Dante turned to face her, and she saw pain in his eyes. "About Marcos." The name struck Isabella like a bullet. Marcos, her younger brother, 23 years old, addicted to heroin, currently in his third stint at a rehab clinic in Colorado. The most painful secret of her life. The reason she needed this job so desperately. The shame that consumed her every single day. "How?" she whispered. "How did they find out?" "I don't know. But the article mentions your significant family financial commitments and speculates about your true motivations for working with me." Dante came back to the bed, taking her hands in his. "Isabella, I need to know. Is there anything else I should be aware of?" She looked into those gray eyes that made her want to confess every sin and felt tears burn the back of her throat. "My brother is an addict," she said finally, her voice cracking. It started in college, got worse after our parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. I I pay for his rehab. It costs $8,000 a month. Dante was very still. That's why I needed the job so badly, she continued, the words tumbling out. Not for ambition or a career, because if I don't pay, he'll end up on the streets. And if he goes back to the streets, he could die, Dante finished softly. Isabella nodded, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. How many people know about this? A few. Margaret, because she has to approve the automatic bank transfers from my salary, and Isabella paused. Jonathan knew. I told him when we were engaged. Dante's expression darkened. That son of a bitch. You think he was the one who leaked it? I'm absolutely certain. Dante stood abruptly, grabbing his phone. Marcos, I need you to find out how Isabella's personal information got to Fortune. And I want a full report on Jonathan Whitmore's activities over the last 48 hours. As he spoke, Isabella curled into the sheets, feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with nudity. Her past, her secrets, her pain, all of it was about to be dissected for public consumption. Are you going to fire me? She asked when he hung up. Dante stared at her with genuine disbelief. Fire you? Why would I fire you? Because now it looks like I'm only with you for the money, for the job. That I'm an opportunist who... Stop. Dante moved to her, cupping her face in his hands. Do you honestly think I care what strangers think about your motivations? But the company, your reputation, my reputation, Dante said firmly, is built on results and integrity, not on magazine gossip. Isabella wanted to believe him, but fear was a corrosive acid in her stomach. Dante, you don't understand. When this article comes out, everyone will think I'm a gold digger, that you're a fool who's being played by a desperate woman. Let them think it. Dante leaned in, kissing her with aching tenderness. The only opinion that matters to me is my own, and I know who you are. Do you? I know you're a woman who sacrifices her own happiness to save someone she loves, who works 16-hour days to pay medical bills that aren't hers, who faces down prejudice and manipulation with dignity. His fingers traced the line of her jaw. I know you are the bravest woman I have ever met. Isabella leaned into his touch, wanting to believe, but the fear still gnawed at her. What if this destroys everything we've built? Then we'll build something better. An hour later, they were in Dante's office. Isabella, impeccable in a pearl gray suit, tried to ignore the furtive glances from the staff. The article was online, and she could feel the weight of their silent judgments. Margaret entered with a grim expression. The article has 147,000 views in the first 2 hours. The comments are mixed. Mixed how? Isabella asked, though a part of her didn't want to know. 50% support you as an example of female strength. The other 50% are calling you... Margaret paused diplomatically. An opportunistic gold digger. Dante's phone rang. Salvatore Industries. A familiar voice cut through the speaker. Dante, it's Victoria Ashford. We need to talk. Now. Victoria, if this is about the article, it's not about the article, darling. It's about what comes next. There was real urgency in her voice. Jonathan is planning something. My niece Caroline called me in a panic. He's talking about correcting the narrative and protecting his political reputation. Dante and Isabella exchanged a worried look. What does that mean? It means he's going to try to publicly destroy her credibility. A coordinated smear campaign. Caroline overheard him on the phone with his campaign manager, talking about documenting a pattern of predatory behavior. What pattern? Isabella asked, nausea rising in her throat. He's going to claim you have a history of attaching yourself to powerful men for financial gain, that you did it with him, and now you're doing it with Dante. The silence in the office was suffocating. There's more, Victoria continued. He has ammunition. What ammunition? Emails you two exchanged during your engagement, photos of you together, financial records showing he helped with your brother's medical expenses. Victoria paused. He's going to frame it as you using him then, just like you're using Dante now. Isabella felt the world spin, and all of her worst fears were materializing at once. When? Dante asked, his voice dangerously controlled. His press aide has booked interviews for this afternoon. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. He's going on air everywhere at 5 p.m. Isabella stood abruptly. I have to go. Isabella. No. She turned to Dante, tears burning her eyes. He's right, you know. I did seek you out because I needed the job. It may not have started romantically, but I needed the money. So what? Dante stood as well. Does that make what we feel any less real? It makes it questionable. Isabella grabbed her purse. It makes it impossible for you to defend me without looking like a lovesick fool. Isabella, don't do this. Don't run. I'm not running. I'm protecting you. She walked to the door. And I'm protecting what's left of my dignity. If you walk out that door, Dante said, and there was real desperation in his voice, you're letting him win. Isabella paused at the threshold, her back to him. He's already won, Dante. The moment I fell in love with you, he won. She walked out, leaving Dante alone with the echo of her words and the sound of his own heart breaking. Isabella spent the rest of the day in her apartment, watching her life being dissected on national television. Jonathan appeared on 3 different networks, always impeccable in his political suits, always wearing that practiced smile that used to make her heart flutter. Isabella is a talented young woman, he told CNN, but she's always had financial struggles that made her vulnerable to relationships of convenience. On Fox, I can't speak to the specifics of our private relationship, but I can say there is a pattern of behavior that concerns me. On MSNBC, Dante Salvatore is a brilliant man, but even brilliant men can be blinded in certain situations. With every interview, Jonathan planted seeds of doubt, always with elegance, always denying any malicious intent. It was master-level manipulation, and Isabella recognized the techniques because she had been a victim of them for 2 years. At 3 p.m., her phone rang. Dante. She didn't answer. He called 17 more times. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Isabella opened it, expecting Dante, but it was Margaret Chang. May I come in? Isabella let her pass, watching, as the older woman took in her modest apartment with a respectful curiosity. He's a wreck, Margaret said, without preamble. Margaret, no, let me speak. I have worked for Dante Salvatore for 8 years. I've seen him fire people without blinking, end relationships as if he were canceling a meeting, treat emotions as inconvenient distractions. Margaret sat on the small sofa. I have never seen him the way he is today. How is he? Like a man in love who has just lost the only thing that actually matters to him. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes again. He canceled all of his afternoon meetings. He's been in his office for 4 hours, just waiting, waiting for you to come back. I can't go back, Margaret. Not after today. Everyone will think. Everyone will always think something. Margaret cut her off. The question is, Are you going to let the opinion of strangers destroy something real? What if it isn't real? What if he's just confused, blinded by the novelty of it all? Margaret smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. Isabella, I've seen Dante Salvatore, blinded by ambition, by anger, by pride. I have never, ever seen him blinded by love until you. Isabella, may I tell you a secret? Margaret leaned forward, her voice low. Dante receives nearly 200 proposals a month. Beautiful, intelligent, well-connected women, some of them genuinely interesting. And in 8 years, I have never seen him look at a single one of them the way he looks at you. How does he look at me? Isabella whispered. As if you are oxygen, as if he can't quite catch his breath when you're not in the room. Isabella closed her eyes, the memory of Dante's arms around her from the night before washing over her. She had felt complete, alive, loved. But what if Jonathan is right? She murmured. What if I'm just an opportunist who... Then why are you here, crying, instead of seizing your opportunity? Margaret asked gently. Why aren't you out there, pretending nothing happened, clinging to your job and your wealthy man? The question struck her with the force of a lightning bolt. Because I love him, Isabella whispered, the truth of it aching in her chest. Because I can't bear the thought of hurting him. Exactly, Margaret said softly. And that, my dear, is the very opposite of opportunism. Margaret rose to her feet. There's a press conference scheduled for 8 o'clock tonight. Dante is going to respond to Jonathan's allegations publicly. What is he going to say? I don't know. But I do know it would be far more effective if the woman he loves were standing by his side. After Margaret left, Isabella was alone with her thoughts. She could hide, let Dante face the storm alone, and shield herself from the public humiliation. Or she could fight. For the first time in her life, she could choose to fight for something that truly mattered. At 7:45, Isabella walked into the lobby of Salvatore Tower. The same cameras that had swarmed her 2 days ago were there, but this time she felt no fear, only determination. Dante stood at the center of the throng of reporters, devastatingly handsome in a black suit, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the guarded pain in his eyes. Then he saw her. The transformation was instantaneous. His shoulders squared, his eyes ignited, and a genuine smile broke through his professional mask. Isabella moved through the crowd until she stood beside him, taking his hand without a flicker of hesitation. Sorry I'm late, she said, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. I had a decision to make. What decision? A reporter shouted from the back. Isabella faced the cameras, straightened her shoulders, and smiled. The decision to stop hiding and start fighting for my own happiness. Camera flashes erupted, but for the first time in days, Isabella didn't flinch. She had chosen love over fear, and by the brilliant light in Dante's eyes, she knew he understood she had chosen him. The Salvatore Tower lobby had never witnessed a moment like it. The flashes exploded like miniature suns as Isabela Montenegro had parted the sea of reporters. When her hand had found Dante's, a hush had fallen, so profound it was almost a sound in itself. Miss Montenegro, a reporter yelled, his voice cutting through the quiet. How do you respond to Senator Whitmore's allegations that you have a pattern of attaching yourself to powerful men for financial benefit? Isabella took a deep breath, feeling Dante's strength flow into her through their clasped hands. She lifted her chin. I respond with the truth, she said, her voice ringing with clarity. Yes, I need this job. Yes, I have financial responsibilities that make professional stability crucial for me. And yes, I fell in love with my boss. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. But let me make something perfectly clear, Isabella continued, her voice gaining strength. Financial need is not the same as opportunism. True love is not the same as manipulation. And standing by my principles, even when it comes at a great cost, is certainly not the same as self-interest. But what about the allegations regarding your previous relationship? Another reporter pressed. Senator Whitmore has presented evidence that you, Senator Whitmore, Isabella cut in, fire flashing in her green eyes, is a man who confuses power with character. He believes social standing gives him the right to manipulate and discard people like convenient objects. Dante squeezed her hand, a proud smile touching his lips. For 2 years, Isabella went on, I allowed him to mold me into a palatable version of myself. A well-dressed doll who smiled for the cameras and validated his political image. When a better option came along, I was discarded like last season's fashion. And Mr. Salvatore, a reporter from Bloomberg, stepped forward. Aren't you afraid you're repeating the same patterns? It was then that Dante stepped forward, his presence commanding absolute attention. Allow me to clarify a few things. His voice sliced through the noise like a blade through silk. First, Isabela Montenegro is the most competent and principled professional I have ever had the privilege of knowing. Second, any suggestion that she has manipulated me is not only offensive, it is ludicrous. He turned slightly, his gaze locking on Isabella with an intensity that made her heart pound. And third, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, in my 36 years, I have never met anyone who challenges me, inspires me, and makes me want to be a better man, more than this extraordinary woman. Mr. Salvatore, a reporter shouted, are you saying that? I am saying, Dante interrupted, still looking directly at Isabella, that I am hopelessly in love with her, and that any man fortunate enough to recognize her worth would be just as lost. The lobby erupted in a cacophony of flashes and shouted questions, but all Isabella could hear was the frantic drumming of her own heart. There is a fundamental difference, Dante continued, finally turning back to the cameras, between Jonathan Whitmore and myself. He saw Isabella as an accessory to his ambition. I see her as my equal, in intelligence, in courage, and in principle. But her financial circumstances, a reporter insisted. Her financial circumstances, Dante countered coldly, are the result of personal sacrifice for someone she loves. If that is a character flaw, then I will take flaws over empty perfection every time. Tears pricked at the corners of Isabella's eyes. No one had ever defended her with such passion, such unwavering conviction. Miss Montenegro, a young female reporter, stepped forward. What is your response to those who say you're using this relationship for professional gain? Isabella looked out at the sea of expectant faces, the cameras aimed at her like weapons, all of them waiting for her to stumble. My response, she said calmly, is that I would rather be judged by my actions than by your assumptions. I would rather be loved for who I am than admired for who I pretend to be. She turned to Dante, her hand coming up to touch his face with a tenderness that drew a collective sigh from the room. And if loving him is a crime, she said, her voice rising for all to hear, then I am guilty, guilty of falling for the most honorable, generous, and courageous man I have ever known. Isabella, Dante whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Guilty, she continued, her words gathering a passionate rhythm, of choosing a love that challenges me to be better instead of one that diminishes me to be palatable. Guilty of believing I deserve to be loved for my strength, not in spite of it. The crowd was utterly silent now, mesmerized. And if Jonathan Whitmore wants to continue this public war, Isabella turned back to the cameras, a final, defiant spark in her eyes. Let him. But this time, he isn't fighting an insecure young woman who is afraid of her own voice. He is fighting a woman who has found not only her true love, but her own power. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room, until the entire lobby was on its feet in a standing ovation. Dante turned to Isabella, and what she saw in his eyes made her tremble. It wasn't just love. It was admiration, respect, pride. "Marry me," he said, so quietly only she could hear. Isabella blinked. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, louder this time, silencing the crowd in an instant. "Dante, I can't offer you a ring right now. Not in the middle of this madness," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "But I can offer you my heart, my life, my promise that I will never, ever try to change you." Isabella was speechless, the world spinning around her. "I can offer you a true partnership," Dante continued, taking both of her hands in his. "Not just in business, but in life, as equals. I can offer you a future where you will never again have to choose between your principles and your security, because I will stand beside you to protect both." Tears were now streaming freely down Isabella's face. "And I can offer you my solemn vow," Dante said. And then he knelt, right there in the lobby of Salvatore Tower, "that I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the most extraordinary woman I have ever known." The lobby was completely silent, every person holding their breath. "Isabela Montenegro," Dante said, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "Will you marry me?" Isabella looked down at the most powerful man in Manhattan, kneeling at her feet, utterly vulnerable before the entire world. She smiled through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. "We can't hear you," someone shouted from the crowd. Isabella laughed, the sound like liquid music in the cavernous space. "Yes," she cried out. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Dante surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as the lobby erupted in applause, cheers, and a blinding storm of camera flashes. When he finally set her down, he kissed her, right there in front of all of Manhattan. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret Chan appeared as if by magic at their side, a genuine smile on her lips. "I believe we have a wedding to plan." 3 weeks later, Isabella awoke in the presidential suite of the Plaza Hotel, wrapped in a white silk robe and the delicious anxiety of her wedding day. Nervous? Sophia, her best friend and maid of honor, asked as she entered with a tray of coffee. Terrified, Isabella admitted, and deliriously happy. A good combination for a bride. Hanging in the armoire was a work of art, an ivory silk Vera Wang gown, perfect for the intimate ceremony they had planned. Just 50 people on the rooftop of Salvatore Tower, with all of New York City as their witness. "How's Marcos?" Sophia asked gently. Isabella smiled. "He's good, really good, for the first time in years. He's going to walk me down the aisle." The decision had been Marcos's. After 8 months of sobriety, he had insisted on taking their father's traditional role. And Jonathan? Silent, Isabella said with satisfaction. It seems attacking a woman in love isn't a winning political strategy. 2 hours later, Isabella stood before the mirror. The gown hugged her curves perfectly. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her eyes shone with pure happiness. Ready? Marcos appeared at the door, looking handsome in his tuxedo. Ready, she said, taking his arm. The rooftop had been transformed into a garden in the sky. At the end of a floral aisle, Dante waited, a smile on his face that lit up the entire city. As the string quartet began to play La Vie en Rose and Isabella appeared at the top of the stairs, Dante felt the world stand still. She was radiant, ethereal, and when their eyes met, he knew with absolute certainty this woman was his destiny. Isabella walked down the petal-strewn aisle, each step resonating with the certainty that she was making the best decision of her life. When Marcos placed her hand in Dante's, she saw tears glistening in his gray eyes. "Take good care of her," Marcos whispered. "With my life," Dante replied, his gaze never leaving Isabella's. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. "Isabella," Dante said, his voice thick with emotion, "you taught me that true power comes from the courage to be vulnerable. I promise to be your partner, your equal, and your greatest champion for all the days of my life." "Dante," Isabella responded, tears streaming down her cheeks, "you showed me that I can be loved for my strength, not in spite of it. I promise to be your partner in every dream, your ally in every challenge, and your companion on every adventure." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and they kissed beneath the vast New York sky, their 50 guests erupted in applause. But Isabella and Dante only had eyes for each other. "Hello, Mrs. Salvatore," Dante murmured against her lips. "Hello, my love," she replied, the happiness in her voice so unfiltered that it brought tears to the eyes of several guests. The reception unfolded in a golden haze of bliss. There was dancing beneath the stars, emotional speeches, and laughter that echoed through the Manhattan night. Isabella danced with her brother, with Dante, and with Margaret, who wept openly with joy throughout the party. "I've never seen him this happy," Margaret confided to Isabella during a slow dance. "In 8 years of working for him, I've never heard such joy in his voice as I have today." When the party finally drew to a close and the last guests had departed, Isabella and Dante found themselves alone on the penthouse terrace, with Manhattan glittering like a sea of diamonds at their feet. "No regrets?" Dante asked, pulling her into his arms. "Just one," Isabella said, and he frowned in concern. "What is it?" "That it took us so long to find each other." Dante laughed, spinning her under the city lights. "Well, Mrs. Salvatore, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time. Is that a promise?" "It's the first promise I make as your husband." And as they kissed beneath the starry New York sky, they both knew they had found something rarer than power, more valuable than money, and more enduring than fame. They had found a love that made them stronger together than they could ever be apart. 2 years later, Isabela Salvatore sat at her desk in the boardroom of Salvatore Industries. Now, the director of corporate diversity and inclusion, she was reviewing the quarterly numbers. The company had grown by 300% since they had implemented her progressive hiring policies. Dante had been right. Diversity wasn't just morally correct, it was financially brilliant. Mrs. Salvatore, her new assistant, a bright young woman named Maria, peeked through the door. "Your husband is on the phone. He said it's urgent." Isabella smiled. She knew their private definition of urgent simply meant that he missed her. "Ciao, amore," she answered. "Ciao, Bella. How are you feeling?" Isabella glanced down at the gentle curve of her belly, where a new life was growing. Their first child, due in December. "Nauseous, tired, and completely happy," she said. "Perfect. Exactly how a future mama should feel." Isabella laughed, touching her stomach gently. "See you at home?" "Always," Dante replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I love you, Isabella." "Anch'io ti amo," she answered in the Italian he had been teaching her. After hanging up, Isabella gazed out the window at Manhattan, stretching infinitely in every direction. Down below, millions of people were living their lives, facing their challenges, chasing their dreams. And she, the once desperate young woman who had said no to the most powerful man in the city, now understood the most important truth of all. Sometimes, saying no to the easy path is the only way to find the one that is true. And true love, when it finally arrives, is worth every moment of waiting, every tear shed, and every broken heart that precedes it. Isabela Montenegro, Salvatore, had learned that the greatest power wasn't in controlling others, but in having the courage to be completely, authentically herself. And in the end, that was precisely what had captured the heart of the Emperor of Manhattan.